for so long, fashion has always been about more and new, and you can only be seen in it once, and once it's been seen, it's done, right? And I think that focus shift into creating pieces that have to be seen over and over again, that have to be appreciated until they start fading. That sort of longevity, that sort of focus. I think that coming through has been really great.
That is Kim Cupido, Senior Catwalk Strategist at WGSN. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Create Tomorrow podcast. I'm your host, Cassandra Napoli, Head of Consumer Forecasting at WGSN. Every 2 weeks, I will take you on a journey to examine how trends are translated into aesthetics and product design. In this episode, we'll hear from WGSN's very own experts, Sara Maggioni, Head of Womenswear at WGSN, Kim Cupido, Senior Catwalk Strategist at WGSN, and Ana Correa, Accessory Strategist at WGSN. In this special Catwalks episode, which we're producing outside of the normal traditional podcast calendar to accommodate the momentum of Fashion Month, we discuss the highs and lows of the season, how the collections reflected the wider trends that we predicted would hit for 2026, and the ongoing tension in fashion between the clothes and the spectacle of the show. So Sara, I'm going to come to you first. Hello.
Hi, Cassandra. How are you? Hello, everyone. I head up the Womenswear team. I'm head of Womenswear. But as a true WGSNer, I kind of work across. We collaborate a lot with other verticals as well. We collaborate a lot in general. That's where the magic happens, right?
I am Catwalk Senior Strategist. So my role during Catwalks, it's quite a fun but rather stressful role during Catwalk season. It's all go for like 4 weeks. And my job is just to analyze the catwalks, look for the emerging trends, the category shifts, the key aesthetics, and how our clients could then apply that to their business.
Hi, everyone. I am an accessories and footwear strategist at WGSN. We cover trade shows, we cover retail, we cover catwalks, everything. And it's just accessories and footwear always add that drop of newness, the extra.
Well, welcome. I want to start off this conversation with the obvious. So I want to ask each of you what you thought of the season. It was a very interesting season, I think. There's lots of newness, a lot of new designers at the helms. So Ana, we'll start with you. What was your kind of key takeaway from the season?
We see like a lot of creativity flourish, kind of like in contrast to our everyday, like lives. But then again, also that turn into, like darkness, but in a very like beautiful and romantic way. I feel this time we saw like a better evolution, and we will also get to see so many designers that changed last season now being in their probably like second or third runway show, right, where they will feel more solidified. I feel like Milan has been the most like surprising for me, has been so great. I mean, Paris started very strongly with Dior, so we will continue to see what happens.
Amazing. And Kim, what's your take?
Prada was one of the standouts for me, particularly in how they presented their show. I think it was a new way of doing it. There were 60 looks, technically 60 looks, but in actual fact, there were only 15. And it was there were 15 looks and they were layered. So we saw that 15 looks 4 times, right? So the first time the models came out, we saw them in their outerwear and these really great outerwear presentation, right? And then you saw the same group of models come out again with that first layer removed. So then we saw knitwear, light outerwear layers. And I think when we got into that second part of the show, everybody was sort of realizing what something feels familiar. I've seen your face before. Why am I seeing you again? And then we went into the third iteration, right? And then all of a sudden it was like you sort of got what was happening. That it was this layering of pieces. And I thought it was a really great way to show off the pieces, right? And how people would actually wear the pieces. Not so much just how people will be seen in the pieces, but how the everyday person will be wearing it, right? How will we, in our real lives, wear this Prada look? And I thought that was a really great aspect of the Prada show, because it really reinforced that the pieces that we're seeing on the runway are meant to be worn. They're not just meant to be seen. They have everyday usability, right? And Christian Dior was so great this season. I mean, Jonathan has really been hitting it out the park with Christian Dior in the last few seasons, but this one, it's so romantic, so whimsical, really, and just so beautiful, so intricate, and again, intricate but very wearable.
Amazing. And Sarah, what about you?
But for me, what I'd say, I also really enjoyed this kind of like new glam that's coming up a bit, you know, Saint Laurent, Tom Ford. I think Saint Laurent in general, I'm just loving the campaigns, you know, the color combinations. It's just amazing. It's that glam, but it's not necessarily, it's interesting. It's in your face, but also not really. It's kind of like wearable. So I'm loving all of that, all of the kind of imagery. Maybe a bit of an obvious one, but I just can't help it, is Bottega Veneta. I think what you know, Louise Trotter is doing is amazing. It's just that sweet spot, right, between wearability, but also those proportions that refresh things. Is that kind of know-how? Is that sort of like quality? It's just I think is phenomenal. She's doing a fantastic job. Someone that I think is underrated is Maximilian Davies at Salvatore Ferragamo. I think he is just doing also a phenomenal job. And again, I don't think he gets talked about as much as, you know, we don't hear about him as much as we should, because I think he's an amazing talent. And I think he's one of those new designers that have taken on a heritage house and really respecting the codes, but making it fresh and interesting. So I think he did really well this season as well. And then just like maybe some smaller names, you know, we have Barch Akyol, Turkish French designer, Julie Kegels, we have Zankov, Maria McManus, Ashlyn in New York, Diotima, Institution, Calcaterra. It's just like, it's smaller names, I'd say. But I think they are definitely names that we have been tracking. And so it's really good to see some of those guys like actually on the runway.
Back in 2026, we forecasted that the year would be all about this idea of redirection, right? Old ideas being challenged, tensions growing at both a global and local level as more people recognize the need for urgent change in the way we treat societies, arrange our industries, work within our environment. I'm curious, how do you think that idea played out now that we're in 2026, with that forecast being from 2.5 years ago?
So I think for me, what I would say, whereas in the past few seasons, you know, it was much more about the gram, you know, the hype and I'm not saying it's not there, but I think that kind of shock factor for the sake of it is perhaps not there as much. And I think this is refreshing. And then the other thing that I think is interesting for me is that there seems to be more focus on the behind the scenes, the inner workings, the sort of like the craft, but also like, you know, there's been like across the press, just maybe a little bit more exposure around, the behind the scene, the process, you know, the actual process. And I think that's probably, again, it's moving away from that hype only, a shock factor and doing it for the gram to like, actually, let's pause. And, you know, we have so much stuff out there. Let's just, you know, do we need to create another things just for the hype? So I think that is reflective of like, again, this is the catwalks, but it's reflective of what we are seeing a little bit in fashion across the board.
I think it's also similar to like what we're seeing in consumer, like the idea that consumers want trust, they want insight, they want, you know, information in an era where everything is sort of AI slop. They want human becomes the luxury. And I think what you're describing is a confirmation for me, at least as a consumer forecaster, seeing that in terms of product.
Absolutely. And I feel that the catwalks this time around have reflected that more than in the past. I don't know if you guys agree. I don't know if Kim and Anna, if you agree, I want to.
I think there's a great example of this in the Prada show, right? Where they had these sort of distressed edges, sort of faded look, where the focus wasn't on new and polished. It was on something being lived in, the sort of clothes we wear every day, right? We for so long, fashion has always been about more and new, and you can only be seen in it once, and once it's been seen, it's done, right? And I think that focus shift into creating pieces that have to be seen over and over again, that have to be appreciated until they start fading. That sort of longevity, that sort of focus. I think that coming through has been really great.
I was going to say, Anna, I want to come to you. New York had a noticeably slimmed down season. There's been a lot of things that have been said about that, whether New York is still relevant or not. As our resident New Yorker on this call, do you think New York Fashion Week still has a part to play? Was there exciting moments? Do you think that anything sort of stood out for you there?
It feels a bit divided because, there's not like a cohesive like space where like before, right? That maybe we will have, I think it was Milk Studios and Lincoln Center where we could go to these two places and maybe some people would show separately. But I feel like now with everyone showing around the city across the board, it has created that bit of a separation and I feel like excitement also from like attendees, right? I was very excited in some of, for example, like Kaite, I feel like is always one of my favorites. Is once again that sweet spot. Tory Burch always surprises me. You always feel like you know her, but then her catwalks, especially her accessories and her footwear, are just like out of this world. I love her. I do love now there's a much more focus in actually inviting people that work in the industry rather than inviting just influencers, or that the influencers we have the bigger space, because I feel like that also became just a spectacle of who has more followers or who's at what show and what row, right? Instead of like really getting what's happening at the show, the clothes, the accessories, what are like the details, right? That the behind the scenes, right? That we're talking so much about.
The thing that is missing for me from fashion shows right now is actually the consumer, like the people that are actually buying your products. You don't see a lot of that. A couple of years ago, they had sort of like lotteries and ways that they could engage like loyal fans. You could win, access or something like that. But in a world where loyalty is so fickle and Gen Z are notoriously not loyal, how do you win their loyalty? I think is through kind of offering experiences like that. So it's interesting you say that. I want to move on to the semi-quincentennial. I say this word probably 3 times a day, if not more, at WGSN now. It's America's 250th birthday. It's looming. It's coming in July. Obviously, the idea of that is that there's probably far more, Americana vibes, patriotism vibes emerging within some of the collections. Anna, as our resident New Yorker, or Kim, potentially as someone who covers the catwalks, if you want to weigh in here, what did you make of this theme? Like, was it really apparent across the season? And in any case, like, how did it show up?
For me, what I've been picking up is not so much an overall feeling of Americana, right? So it's the sort of greater American patriotism coming through in the collections. I think what's been really interesting is some of the heritage New York brands have been celebrating their own heritage, right? So they've been celebrating their heritage and how that plays into the sort of our idea of classic American design, right? So we saw at Coach, they leaned into their sort of varsity workwear, vintage vibe. Michael Kors, for his 45th anniversary, did his New York chic, right? Calvin Klein leaned into his archival minimalism. And so there was that real playful, with the priority brands, there was that real leaning into their own heritage and celebrating that heritage as part of American design heritage, more than an overall celebration of I think, the anniversary.
What I've noticed in the past, I would say, couple of years, is that actually I find street style there really interesting. And the reason why I'm saying is because I know that, like, New York of the 80s and the 90s, it's always been famous for that. But then I feel that there was a time where it was very much about that sort of very contemporary New York look, cool, but very New York, very tailored, very sleek, and not necessarily the most exciting from an inspiration point of view. But I have to say, in the past couple of years, every time I've been to New York, like I would literally be like, shall I just stop that person and ask to take a photo? Because it's like, even randomly, if I'm not working, right, I'm just like going for breakfast and I'm like, wow. And it was so many wow moments. And of course, I'm there when it's fashion week and when it's, trade shows, etc. But I'm even talking about areas that like maybe you're, not necessarily the central areas, and they're not necessarily all models that are in New York for Fashion Week or fashion editors. I'm talking more about like younger generation, like possibly students. But I have to say there's something like very captivating, the way, it's just that cool, but like not overly, over the top, just done right. And I've noticed that, and I've been going to New York for many years now, but I've noticed that really increasing in the past couple of years, I'd say. I'm just finding it really, really interesting from a street style point of view.
I think it's that end again that we were talking about, like that the two things can be true at the same time.
Yeah.
Like New York is known as sort of streamlined, classic wardrobes of all black. Carolyn Bessette obviously becoming a huge influence at the moment on the streets, but then also sort of interesting maximalism at the same time. So I think that bifurcation of trends is really interesting to explore. Okay, I want to ask about the idea of romance on the catwalks, because that's sort of been everywhere this season. I know in our conversations, Kim, you had mentioned Ulla Johnson in New York, Ardem in London, Blue Marine in Milan, Dior in Paris. It really goes on and on. So I'm curious, how has this notion of femininity and romanticism really evolved this season, and perhaps what's driving this trend?
Yeah, you're right. That romance, we've seen so many romance trends coming on the catwalks this season. And what's really interesting is that it's not really one distinct romance direction, right? There isn't a romance aesthetic for the season. We've seen different directions taken. So we have the sort of dark romance direction, like we saw it at Blue Marine. We saw it at Pauline Degencourt in London as well. Where's like layered sheers, black lace, moody florals, moody prints coming through. And then from our own forecast for the season, our flawed romance and renaissance of real, with flawed romance, we're seeing a sort of an imperfect romance, a sort of unpolishedness, some distressed edges with lace, a sort of faded feel. And we saw that combined with the sort of ornateness of Renaissance of Real at Ardem in London, but then also at Dries Van Noten in Paris, where we had this really intricate embellishment, but it wasn't super polished. It was placed asymmetrically. It might finish halfway down the bodice, right? We've had sort of material mix. So it looked a bit mix and match, a bit unfinished, a bit faded, but it was really intricate and really beautiful, right? And then also we've seen sort of the romance trends infiltrating tailoring this season, whether that's in the sort of softer silhouettes. We've seen a lot of soft peplums coming through on tailored jackets, but then also in styling as well. We've seen the sort of romantic shirts paired with tailoring. So you get this really great bow or ruffles peeking out from collars and cuffs. So there's been quite a few romantic directions coming through in the catwalks. And what's really great is that there's not that one distinct direction. There's a bit of pick and choose for people to choose from.
What I would say is like, why is this happening is we are seeing a kind of like a boom in the romance fiction genre. Obviously, Wuthering Heights, and Wuthering Heights, the film is, as Kim just described it, it's really not the perfect romance, especially if you've read the original book. And so it's kind of like it's playing out. So there is, and then we have, with the romance fiction boom is, it's fandom behind it. It's like you have fans and therefore it grows. And so it's actually across the zeitgeist, it's really picking up, is that idea of like imperfect romance. And so we are seeing that a lot. And I guess it also goes back kind of what Kim was saying, to that more human-centric and, imperfect sort of design, that kind of, we've done reports on Insight on analog dating. So really going back to like dating in real life, we've done reports on the return of writing. We are seeing that playing out from a print and graphics perspective as well. We're seeing calligraphy becoming, the new logo, becoming the new branding, more intricate branding coming through. So it's all connected. So this is what I'm saying. Like on the catwalks, we're getting the first taste, but this is going to continue.
Yeah, that's such a good one. I want to also stay with you, Sarah, here, because I just want to finish up on Milan. I think we have to talk about just all of what happened in Milan. We had Demna at Gucci, Maria Grazia's first Fendi show, Marni, obviously. Milan felt very loud this season. We touched on this earlier. As your hometown is Milan, I just wanted to give you the opportunity to kind of talk us through some of those big moments.
I just, I kind of would like to touch on the Winter Olympics now, right? Because they just happened, and they wore Milan Cortina, which is about 4 hours from Milan. But anyway, it's kind of like, it's Milan Cortina. But I would say there is this new energy that is just super interesting. And apart from the big names like Demna and, Maria Grazia, I think is also, as I was saying, like the smaller ones, the least suspected, that I already covered. But I think it's just a really interesting and exciting city at the moment. I would say that like Paris and Milan are my favorite. I'm really interested to see what's going on with the London Fashion Week as well. I think, with Laura Weir at the helm now, she's kind of like, moving into a new direction. So that's definitely another one to watch.
I want to come to you, Ana. I have to, continuing on this Milan conversation, we have to talk about the fact that Mark Zuckerberg and his wife were at Prada front row. There has been some speculation around why he was there. Can you talk us through that and what you think it means for the next, year or so?
Meta has started to partner with a lot of fashion brands, especially like in the accessories, eyewear sector. So we already have, Meta working with Ray-Ban. Then we have Essilor Luxottica, which, with Oakley, they also released their own like Meta frames. So there are big rumors that Prada is going to collaborate with Meta with a pair of smart frames. Right now, this is something that it feels much more natural than, if you are like in the industry. The last eyewear trade show that I covered, actually in Milan, the funny thing is that obviously we always go there for this like craftsmanship, like Italian eyewear craftsmanship is like, famous for it, and for color and all of that. But then again, there's like this whole new area where everybody is also jumping into like smart qualities for eyewear, right? So I feel like this is just the nature of things, right, as they are evolving. And of course, I mean, with him being Meta, that's why we assume, or we're almost certain, that's why he was there. Another billionaire walked in the runway of Matière Fécale. And the funny thing is that the name of the collection is called the 1%. So I feel like that kind of could be ironic, could be a funny joke, whatever, I don't know. Like, yes, definitely irony. But it's just, at the end of the day, these people are driving the AI revolution, and they want to be part of the fashion and luxury world because they know how much, financial like shopping power is there. So it was only a matter of time. And we know, for example, like Prada is known for being futuristic, for being interested in technology as well as craftsmanship. So, and at the end of the day, Meta is the one that does have like the technology to work with them. What I just hope is that, it's a design that all like, then I'm sure it will, that it does show who Prada is as well, and it's not just like another frame, because that's what we really want. The way I foresee, we foresee like the future about this is that tech wearables really do become seamless, and they don't feel like a technology accessory.
And we're not creating just for the sake of creating, right? Adding to the trend cycle. So I think that's a good place to leave it. Leave everyone on their toes for next season. I do ask all of my guests the same question, though, at the end, which is, who is somebody that you admire who's creating a new version of tomorrow that you find deeply inspiring? So I guess we'll come to you first, Sarah. Who is your pick?
What I would say, I think, even here, I'd go for that duality that we've been talking about, that coexistence. And I'd say I'm very excited about innovation, particularly, the progress around materials, but also color, like particularly color, so structural color, bio-based colors. Company like Sparkcell in Cambridge-based, UK-based Sparkcell, they just kind of do like 100% plant-based glitter and sequins, but also in the US cell sense. So, and what's exciting is that these innovations are becoming scalable, because that's what's exciting for us, right? It's great to have innovation. It's great to have all these new prototype and concepts, but to really have an effect, they need to be scalable. So I would say is this coexistence, right? Of like innovation on one side, scalable color, but then also those designers and image makers and taste makers, they're really going back to their craft. They're really, they're really exploring and really sticking to it. So I would say it's the two. Future is not one thing. I would say is this, the coexistence is the future for me.
Okay, Kim, who is your pick?
It's actually 3 African brands who I feel are really pushing African design forward. And there are so many brands that could fit into this mold, right? But I'm going to limit myself to 3 brands that are showing at the Big Four. And first is Makosa, who will show it in Paris. And here you have the sort of vividly patterned, like the bold colors in the labels knitwear that feels fresh, that feels contemporary, but has a really nostalgic South African look to it. So that's always a great treat for me. I always look forward to the Makosa show in Paris. And then in Milan, another South African brand, but a completely different aesthetic again, and that's Uniform. And they do this sort of sculptural tailoring. They call it emotional tailoring, where they focus on volume and texture and how that can be applied to pieces that we see as familiar, to create something new. And I think that's always great. And then for my final pick, I am Isigo. They're a Nigerian brand. They are a 2026 semi-finalist for the LVMH prize. And they do really also handmade sculptural pieces. They focus on traditional construction techniques. A lot of their textiles are woven and repurposed and recycled to create something new. So watch out for those 3 African brands in the catwalks this season.
Amazing. And Ana, last but not least.
First, I have 2. One, I would say J.W. Anderson really is giving me all the hope that I need in fashion at the moment. He's just, being so wonderful about reviving a house that is so like iconic in its heritage. For the Mexico City Fashion Week, my favorite designer is Francisco Cancino. I admire him very much. I feel like a lot of designers have tried to kind of like conquer that, once again, your American heritage, but also not diving too much into being very true or traditional, right? So he feels very fresh, very contemporary. All of his designs are extremely wearable, but then again, you still feel his, Mexicanity, I guess, in his designs. So extremely like elegant, the materials, the colors that he uses, all of the effects, the craftsmanship, I think is just like so wonderful. So those are my two picks. I'm excited to see what Mexico City Fashion Week will bring.
Thank you to my guests, Sara Maggioni, Head of Womenswear, Kim Cupido, Senior Catwalk Strategist, and Ana Correa, Accessory Strategist. If you're a WGSN subscriber, look out for more trends at WGSN.com. And if you're not a subscriber, please come and discover our services. We'll be back with our next episode soon. In the meantime, you can catch the CEO of WGSN, Carla Buzasci, next week on our other podcast, Lives of Tomorrow. I'm your host, Cassandra Napoli. Be sure to follow and subscribe to this podcast, and see you next time.